Now, Daf Chaf Aleph on the base. Be Alma Barber Shusopata. The Torah says that you're only chai for a Barber Shusarabim, Vishani Hacha. Here the case is different. When he was Makta Mokom, L'Shusarabim, he designates this place for the Rabbim, and he puts his peros there. And Rav says that when the animal eats the peros, he's potter. That's Mishum. Why is that? The Omer, the Bala Behema says, Lav kol kaminach de makarvis lehu leperosach. You don't have a schus to bring your peros all the way up l'rishus harabim umechayves lehu toroi. So you're mechayv all the shvarim on my shore that goes and eats it. Shmuel Omer bi'alma bar b'shuso chayim. Once he was mafkir the area around the bar, then it's as if he created a bar b'shus harabim, even though he owns the bar. But in the case of maktam makom, and he puts his peros there, that's different than bar b'shusa. Why? The bishleim a bar. I understand why he's chayiv in bar. Ikol meim lava daite. The shore is not going to differentiate between, whether to watch and make sure that he doesn't fall into the bar, because he's allowed to go there right up to the bar. And the Bailim were mafkir the Rishus. Therefore, the Balabar is Chayim. Ela Peros, Mikol Memelava Daite. Can you tell me that the shor didn't know, he didn't suspect that there would be Peros? Hachazilu. Certainly he sees the Peros and he should have been careful. And therefore, if the Behema slips and hurts itself on these Peros, then the one who put the Peros down there is put. The Gemara now suggests that Lema Mechazer is Tanoihi. In other words, in the case of the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel about an animal that's in Rishus Harabim, but stretches out its arm and eats mitzidei rechava, Rav says Yechav, Shmuel says the potter is indeed a machlokas tanoim. Tisani, we learn to the Brisa ochla mitoch harechava mishalemes mashenenes. In other words, we're talking about Shem Rishus Harabim, so there's no chiyuv of nezikin. But if it ate mitzidei rechav mishalemes mashi zika divrei Rabbi Meir, v'Rabbi Yehuda, it means according to this opinion, if it eats mitzidei rechava, then you pay nezikin. And Rav Yossi and Rabbi Lazar argue v'yomer ein darko lechol el lahalik, whatever that means. So the Gemara is going to explain it. But we understand very well that according to Rav Yossi, we're talking about an animal that ate b'tzidei harachava. I mean, that's what it says over here. And since ain't darkol lechol b'tzidei harachava, therefore it becomes keren, and he pays mashi zika. So the Gemara asks Kash, Rav Yossi hainu Kamma. So what is Rabbi Yossi just simply repeating what Rabbi Meir said? They both say Yechai for Tzidei Harachava. What is the machlokas? Ella, we have no choice but to say B'machzeres Ika B'nai. Tanakam Sover Machzeres Nami Mishali Mashenenes. For Rabbi Yossi Sover Mishalemes Mashi Zika. So here's the way we're going to explain Rabbi Meir. Mitzidei Arachava, in the words of Rabbi Meir, and we say Mishalemes Mashi Zika, it means that the behema went on to the Tzidei Arachava and it ate there. So now Mishalemes Mashi Zika, but if it didn't stand and remove its feet and its whole body and place it down in the Tzidei Arachava, but rather Rishus Harabim, and it was Machzeres Rosha, and it ate from Tzidei Rechava, is Eina Mishalemes Ela Mashenenes. And that's like the sheet of Shmuel. Rav Yossi Cholek, Rav Yossi says, Ein Darkol Lechol B'chizur Ela Rak Lahalech. And therefore, if Hechzira, it becomes Keren. It becomes Lav Urche and Yechayah. So it turns out that the Machlokes between Rav and Shmuel is machlokas tanoim in the din of Machazeres, and the Gemara rejects it. Look, they're not arguing here, these Tanoim, about Machazeres, to Kuli Alma, whether it's Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi, Machazeres, Ikaravi Kishmur. Either like Rav, who says you're Chayav, or like Shmuel, who says you're Potter. And Shmuel would say you only pay Mashanenis. The Hachas in this Brisa, we're not talking about Machazeres at all, but rather Ochler Rishus Rab Mamish. Rab Meir Poter, Rab Yossi Mechayev. And what's their argument about the old Ubir B'Steyacher business? Ubir B'Steyacher Kamiflagi. Mar Sover, according to Rabbi Meir, Bir B'Steyacher V'lo B'Rishus Rab, and therefore, when he says Mitoch Harach V'Mishalemis Mashanenes, it's because B'Torah's Shein, he wouldn't be Chayev. It's not Ubir B'Steyacher. It's Rishus Rab. Umar Sover, Rabbi Yossi holds Ubir B'Steyacher V'lo B'Rishus Hamazik. Which means that if the animal ate Bershus Mazik, because the Nizak, right, if the animal ate in its own Rishus, meaning the Rishus of the Baal Bahema, because the Nizak brought his peros into the Chutz of the Baal Vais without permission, when the animal eats it, the Baal Vais is potter, because who told you to bring your animal into my Rishus? Into my bias. But nevertheless, there's no ptur in which the Torah exempts Shein versus Sarabin. So the Gemara rejects this pshat in Rabbi Yossi. And the Gemara asks, do you need a pasuk to pater versus hamazik? Lema, paracha, or peirocha, peirach, vershusi, my boy, what is your part doing in my rishus? So I don't need a pasuk for that. Ela, but rather machlokes is about the machlokes of the Ilfa Rav Oshia that we had on Daf Chaf Omen Alfi Kabenai. Ilfa was one who said that Behema Rishus Rabim, if it stretches its neck and eats peros on top of its colleague, meaning on top of another behema, then you're chayav, because that's considered, al gav ha-behema, is considered Rishus Hadizak. So it's not Rishus Rabim. Rabbi Oshi Omar, that the animal in Rishus Rabim that jumped and ate something from the kupa, that's called keren, that's Meshuna. And the Gemara explains that the machlokas Tanoim is the following, that according to Rabbi Meir, even in these cases, ptura, in all situations, even if poshta tzavara or kafta mishalemis mashinenes, because we're talking about shein versus Rabbi. Whereas Rabbi Yossi holds chayeves, he holds like Rabbi Ilfa and Rabbi Oshia, and therefore ein darko lechol means bepishu tzara v'kfitza elahalech, and therefore in these cases he's chayav mishum shein because it's lav urche. So the final maskana is that these Tanoim are not arguing about mechazeres, and that leads us to the Mishnah here in the middle of Daf Chaf Aleph Amid Beis. Hakelev hagedisha koftu mirosh hagag. So they jump off the roof in a Rishus HaYochid, and Shavras HaKelev is then Mishalim Nezek Sholem. So this is called Regel. Mipnei Shei Mu'odin. Because animals jump. They jump off a roof. And therefore you should have protected the animal and supervised it. You're Chayim. And Regel, of course, is Chayiv Nezek Sholem. And it's called Mu'ad Mitchilasa. Hakelev shenotel charav v'holach legodish v'yochel es charav v'idlik es hagodish. So this is a case we've had in the past where the animal takes this burning cookie together with the coals and puts down the coals on a godish, on someone's haystack, and then eats the charara. So in such a case, for the achilas charara, mishalim nezek sholem, right? That's called shein. And again, we're talking about Rishus HaYochid. V'al Hagodish Mishalim Chatzi Nezek, because that's considered Mishuna, and there's a Chiv Keren. Could be another pshat that you pay Chatzi Nezek midin tzroros. The Gemara says, time of the Chavtzu, the reason why the Mishnah says the Baal Machayev to pay Nezek Shalem is because the animal jumped off the roof and damaged. And it's Derech Lasos Kain, and he should have watched it, and therefore it's considered Shane, and he's Chayev Nezek Shalem. Hanaflu, the implication is, if, let's say, the animal slipped on a banana peel up on the roof and broke Kalim in the Rishus HaNizak, it would seem for the Mishnah that Potter. Why? That's not Motzi at all, and he didn't have to worry about such a thing. He didn't have to anticipate such a possible scenario. Alma Kasava, we see that Chilasa B'Pshia B'Sofa Ba'ones Potter. That even though the Bailam were Poshea B'Shmira, they shouldn't have been, how should I say, naive about the possibility that the animal would jump off the roof. But at the end, the animal did not jump off the roof. It fell off the roof. And that means it's sofa ba'ones is your pot. Now, we're not going to say that because he made a pshia at the beginning in the Shmira, by not considering the likelihood that the animal would jump off the roof, still sofa ba'ones, and therefore he's pot. Tanya nami hachi. Hakelev hagedisha koftu mirosh hagag v'shavras hakelim mishalim nezek shalim. So again, it's a natural, anticipated behavior pattern for the animal once it's on the roof to jump off the roof, and therefore it's muad. He should have been careful about it, and he has to pay nezek shalim. But naflu, if the animal slips on a banana peel off the roof and breaks kalim, p'turim. The Bailam don't have to pay Tashlumin and Zikim because it's not Motsui, and they weren't even going to be Shomer. It's like Ones. So the Gemara asks, Hani, Laman Diyom Tchilasim Shiva Sofona as Pota, Laman Diyom Chayev, according to the opinion that Tchilasim Shiva Sofona is Chayev, Ma'ikal Amema. How would we interpret this Mishnah and this Brisa? And this is going to be a sugya later on in Masechet Bava Kamma in the third parak. So the Gemara answers that this Amoru who holds Chilosub Shov Sofenis Chayev, he's going to interpret the Mishnah in a different way. Can go into Makarve Kalim Lagabi Kosel. That there were Kalim in the Chutz of the Nizak, very close to the Kosel. And the Gedi or the Kelev jumped onto the Kosel. And what's going to happen if they jump off the Kosel? The Chikafzik Bikfitza Lo Nafli Alay. Because the kalim are so connected, so close to the wall itself, when they jump off, then they're not going to break the kalim. The kalim are sort of like protected by the kosa. And that's because when you jump off a high place, you don't land right below it, but rather you project it a little further. And therefore, if the animal actually fell close to the kotel and broke kalim that were there at the foot of the wall, is afil tchilosu pshia leka. There was no pshia the Bailam here, because the Bailam did not anticipate any possibility that even if kfitza would happen, the kfitza would have any impact on the kalim that are sitting there right near the wall. There are situations in which even if the kelev or the gedif slips on a banana peel, falls off the Rosh Hagag, breaks kelim, and you're chayim. Is mishkaches lei b'kosel ra'ua. So even though the animal fell off the roof, we still could blame the Baal Behema. Why didn't you anticipate that the animal would fall off the roof? Because it's a kosel ra'ua. In other words, when you build a kosel, you put a wall, a fence around the kosel. That's called a makkah. And here the makkah was very shaky. It was not well founded. And therefore, even with regard to nefila, there's a pshia here. So Gemara asks, "My ninu." He should have realized and anticipated the possibility that the wall will fall. Affecting Gemara, Soflo Nofal Orche. I'm sorry, Orche. I forgot the word Orche here. Right, Orche means the levanim, the bricks. So in other words, he should have entertained the possibility that the levanim would fall from the kotzel because it's a kotzel ruin, it's going to break the kalim. But affecting Gemara, that's not what happened. L'maisa, sof lo nafal orche v'nafalei. The bricks did not fall down. It's the Kelev and the Gedi that fell down. And the Gemara says, and this is going to be a raya again, that Tchilas B'Shiva Sof Ma'ones is chayav. We go after the original Pshia. It's against the man who holds Tchilas B'Shiva V'Sof Ma'ones pot. So once again, we're stuck with a kasha, according to the man who says that Tchilas B'Shiva V'Sof Ma'ones pot. I mean, before we asked the kasha on the man who said Sof Ma'ones chayav, now we're asking man Yomer says Sofa Biones pot. Gemara answers Lotzricha Bekosel Tsar, that there was a makeh around the top of the gag, but it was tsar. It was very thin. He says in the name of a second lishon in Rashi, Mishupa. And since it's Mishupa, it's on an angle, Hoyelo Lahalos V'daito sheyichvitzu al hamake kedarkan machas umachmas shipolu yiplu mimenu. No, it's because the gader is on an angle. It's like falling. When the animal goes to jump, it's going to knock off. It's going to knock down the kota. So that's considered a pshia, even as far as nefilas. Because as we said, the animal's weight is going to push the gader over, and then the animal will fall. They jump from down to up. And broke kelim. In other words, this is not the derech of a kelev or a gedi to break kelim when it goes from down to up. It usually falls down and breaks kelim. And therefore, this becomes lav urche, which means it becomes keren, and therefore you pay chatzines. But milamala lamata, when it jumps down from a high place, chayavim, that's because it's darkam b'kach. It's what we call in this case regel, and you pay nezek shalom. Adam v'tarnagol shedilgu. So a human being and a hen jumps and breaks kelim is bein milamala lamatu, bein milamala lamata, even if they go down, which is milamala lamata, nevertheless, no, I'm sorry, even if they go up, which is milamata lamala chayav, they pay nezek shalom. Why? Because there's a difference between an Adam and a Tarnagol. A Tarnagol, it's darko likfots benkach ubenkach. It's normal for the Tarnagol to jump. And therefore you have to pay, and you always have to pay nezek shalom midin regular. But for a man to jump and be mazik, it's ain't darko b'kafitza milamata lamala. You don't usually jump upwards, you jump downwards. But nevertheless, you pay nezek shalom because Adam would liola. There's no such thing as tam with regard to Adam amazik. And therefore, even if the hezek turned out to be meshuna, where he jumped upwards instead of downwards, he still has to pay nezek shalom. And now the Gemara is going to raise a stira between two brisos. For her Tanya, we have one brisa that says Akelev Hakdisha Dilgu Bein Milamala Lemata Ubein Milamala Lemata Keturim. the Baal doesn't have to pay Nezikin. And that contradicts what we learned in the previous price, so that in Dilgu Milamata Lamata, the Baal is Chayiv Nezik Shalim. And the Gemara answers, Tirgama Rav Papa B'di Apich Mepach, that the Kelev and the Gedi changed their nature, so to speak. They were Medalik Shalok Kedarkon, because in a normal situation, the Gedi and the Derech HaGedi Likfos Bivas Achas, V'derech HaKelev Lisorech Uleichais B'tziparav Likfos. And here, what was unusual? That Kalga Bizrika V'gadja Bizrika. They switched it around. The Kelev did a kfitza the way a Gedi would do it, and the Gedi was Nisrach V'nechas B'tziparnav, and he jumps like a Kelev. And therefore, the Bible pot. But in the previous brisa, we're talking about Dileg and Kedarkom. It was a normal Dilu, and therefore, in a case of Milamala Lamata, which is normal behavior, the Baal Machayim Nezik Shalom. So the Gemara see Hachi, if that be the case, Amai Pturim. So why is it that the Baal Mapotul Gamre? Why don't we say it's Meshuna, and therefore it's a told of Karen, and he should pay Chatzi Nezik? And the Gemara answers, Potur mi Nezik Shalom v'Chayiv v'Chatzi Nezik. That which it says that you're Potur, it doesn't mean you're Potur Gamre, but it means you don't have to pay Nezik Shalom, but you only pay Chatzi Nezik.